one of the pieces that I think is been helpful for me as I've grown is like, I can't solve all these complex problems, right? I got to make the problem simpler. I have to make it simpler, because if I don't make it simple, it's going to be, again, one, stuck in the analysis, or two, a lot too many variables. And so like, let's make the problem smaller and let's try and solve it in a shorter period of time, right? If my goal is to have 5x revenue in 3 years, okay, well, what's the goal this year? Maybe what's the goal this quarter? Let's break it down into a smaller problem, right? Like keep our eye on the trajectory, right? And understand how that fits in. But if we can make the problem a little smaller, then it's a little easier to solve.
Welcome to The Roll Call, the podcast where we dive into the roles that define us. I'm your host, John Glahn. On each episode, we explore the journeys of people discovering their true roles in life, business, and beyond. Get ready for inspiring conversations about finding purpose and authenticity. Let's roll the roll call. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Roll Call podcast. I have with me my very good friend, Dan Papajcik, P-A-P-A-J-C-I-K, for those that want to try to pronounce it in the wrong way, because I have an easy name that is hard to mess up. So I roll with that. Long intro, but I really, this has been something that I've been waiting for since I started podcasting. Dan is one of the most interesting people that I've ever met in my life, one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and just a genuine energizer bunny full of laughter and energy. And Dan, thank you for finally finding some time to be on here.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, John. Thanks.
So I messed up my own intro just for that reason, but we're all here and accounted for. Let's start the roll call.
Excellent.
So Dan is many things, has been many things in his career, and he's coming in here today as the Midwest leader for Alliant Insurance Services. And there's an entrepreneurial story that's behind that. So, Dan, I don't even know where to start other than because you have such an interesting story and background to get to where you are today, the different titles you may have or whatever it might be. So let's start with where is your entrepreneurial journey started?
Thanks for asking that. So what I'd share, a few things. Today I sit on a team with some great people. I'm a member of the leadership team, part of Alliant, and that journey for me started kind of early days in something that doesn't happen very much today, but it's delivering a newspaper. So I'm in high school and I get this opportunity to deliver the local Cleveland Plain dealer in the hometown I grew up in, and that kind of as a young person, every single day it's non-optional behavior. You got to wake up. You got to deliver the newspaper. People get mad. You get phone calls to your house. Where's my newspaper? And I did that for about through high school. And then I had some siblings take it over, but that experience of you show up, you put the effort in, and something happens from it. I had a great experience, doing work and getting paid some money to do it. Yeah. That was impactful. And then I went off to college and went from college from undergrad to law school. Went to Ohio State for law school, and then I served in the Army for about 5 years. I was a JAG attorney, and in that experience, right, that is an environment. It was a wonderful environment to be in professionally. It was great. I had great leaders who taught me how to be a young professional, how to be an attorney, and I very much valued that time.
You know what? I got to stop. Yeah, right.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in,
because that is just not a common path.
Correct.
And again, for many of the things that I've known about you too, right? How easy it could have been to jump into the law firm. Just again, pick what it might be, defense attorney, whatever it might be, where there might be money to go be made, and you chose to go serve your country in that capacity. Talk through that process.
Sure. So I had been attracted to wanting to serve. I wanted more of a traditional college experience, so I went the ROTC route. Then I think the reason I wanted to serve was just really more of a life experience desire than anything, right? I was aware that the armed services provided this very broad opportunity to work with lots of different people. I grew up in a relatively homogenous community, and I was fortunate that was great, provided me a lot of resources and opportunities, but I wanted a broader experience. And so I knew the Army was going to grant me that. And as I got into it, I signed up when I was 18 years old, and I wasn't serving until I was all the way through law school, right? Yeah. 7 years later. And then those 5 years in my mid to late 20s were really broadening. It was wonderful. My first job, I was a legal assistance attorney, so I helped service members, retirees, and their dependents navigate relatively consumer-facing legal issues. And that's you're really helping someone, right? Someone comes into your office and they purchased a car that that was a lemon car, or they had some sort of landlord-tenant issue, and they don't have the capacity necessarily to navigate that, and in many cases they can't frankly afford an attorney. And so helping step in, that's a service the Army provides. And so that was, again, like, I didn't have many of those issues, thankfully, as a young person, but people do, and so getting to help them was actually pretty impactful for me.
Yeah. So then, and I know obviously you went deeper into many other realms of possibility within that career space. Then what?
So as I was exiting the Army, I was a prosecutor towards the end of my Army time. And like, that's a great job. I know many prosecutors, they do an excellent job. There are many defense attorneys, they do an excellent job. Like, our justice system is full of professionals. But as I looked at what I wanted to do, I wanted to not move in the criminal law direction. I think it takes an emotional toll. That was something that I was aware of, and that I wanted to move back towards business. I had a desire and an interest in learning more about business and understanding a little bit more. So it was more of a quest for learning than frankly anything. And I was fortunate that I had made some connections, and I was able to step into a role at MetLife. And so for about 4 years, I was able to learn about group employee benefit insurance. And so helping employers select employee benefits that would help their employees. And so that was a very relationship-driven business. I was based out of Detroit, and really enjoyed getting to work with a number of large employers and medium-sized employers in the area. So that was a good exposure, because I had clients in all different types of industries, and that fed my interest and curiosity, kind of understand how their business work and how employee benefits decisions shaped into their business plans.
Yeah. So then from MetLife, I think from there is where you got to step into some of the entrepreneurial experience from there, right?
I did. I had a great opportunity. A friend and partner of mine, Mike Maliff, he helped make an introduction to a woman named Carol O'Rourke, who was sunsetting her business, and made a transition. So I acquired that business and brought on some great partners who helped us grow that. So I stepped away from MetLife and into a relatively small but very successful consulting practice, and helped then to grow that over a period of years. So from 2013 until 2020, we went. It wasn't exactly straight up. There were some bumps along the way, and we'll talk about those bumps. But it was really stepping into a much more entrepreneurial environment.
Yeah. So let's just step into the bumps.
Yeah. Yeah. So early on, so in the early days, we had a couple partners who were at different career points. One of the things that and I think we as a team were really successful in was attracting people who were cultural misfits wherever they were sitting. So they're sitting in an organization that doesn't match them for whatever reason. And we provided, I think, a couple things. Some flexibility around, understanding how to bring competent individuals forward that sometimes more mature organizations just don't have. So we were a somewhat smaller organization. We could afford to be flexible. One of the best hires that we ever made, who's still with us today, she was told by her existing employer that she could never do the job from home. And she wanted to move. She was she was engaged, and she was moving across the country from Chicago to Arizona. And her employer told her that. And so we hired her. And it was great. One of the best hires, easily one of the best hires that we ever made. And what I like to say is we let people work from home before it was cool.
Yeah. Right.
Which was just, and she was excellent. She was very accountable. She I think performed probably better than people who at that time were always showing up at the office. And so that is an example, I think, of making sure that you have like the mindset to get the right people in the right seats and also provide the workspace environment where they can excel, right? I mean, we created an environment where she could excel, and gosh, she crushed it.
Yeah, right. And I think in some of the other experiences I've heard with you too, right? If you hire right and with the right boundaries and the right expectations, right, you can take the hands off, right? You don't have to hyper manage growth out of someone if you set that up right.
Yep. And I think you talk about the bumps, right? One of the things that we had to deal with was to some extent, breaking a mindset around creating rules for maybe the lowest performer, right? We never measured people's hours. We didn't. That sounds crazy, but we didn't measure people's hours because we were measuring the outcome. Yeah, we're like, did you get the job done? We'll have a conversation if you're not going to get the job done, but listen. We wanted to have flexibility so that when someone needed to take care of a kid or go to a dentist appointment in the middle of the day, they weren't clocking in or out, because at the same time, sometimes emergencies happen and they get a phone call at night. I don't want them saying, "Oh, well, I don't answer the telephone." Then I want them to, have a accountability mindset, and they did, and our people did. They were wonderful people, and I think that was an important feature. One of the bumps that we ran into was we had a partner who just didn't align with that. And we went through a process to have them exit over, it took a period of time. They were a significant part of our organization. We had to negotiate and navigate that. And we ultimately got to the right outcome and an agreement, frankly, that worked for both of us. But that process, that friction in a small organization when you have someone who's not aligned is so disruptive. And it's not as easy as just saying, "Hey, can you just leave?" Right? Like that's not how that works.
Right. Yeah. Cause I think we call those, I can't remember what matrix might be called, but, high performer, low core value, they're a terrorist in the organization, right?
Yeah.
Cause they're like, "Yeah, I'm worth way too much to you. But you can't fire me." Right.
It's difficult. And I think, and frankly, because of their position and role, like we want to be very thoughtful and deliberate in that process. But once we understood the misalignment, that individual and we understood we had to move forward in different pathways. Yeah. And actually that recognition, while it took a little bit, was very frustrating, was personally like very challenging. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, once you kind of recognize that, you're like, okay, let's negotiate an outcome. Let's find the right settlement between both of us and be able to move forward. But at the same time, like that, I look at that learning experience of, okay, I reflect on that even today. And I say, okay, what questions could we have asked a little earlier? How could we have asked ourselves better questions about alignment? How could we have checked in better? How could we have, rearview mirror, maybe it's 2020, but I don't know that we could have solved that issue, but rather I think being aware of it as we brought on more team members, that was very helpful. Like it became crystallized who we wanted to be in the organization.
Yeah. And I think there's, it's hire slow, fire fast mentality that can be very difficult. Both of them can be difficult, right? Yep. When you're trying to burn and try to go fast and try to hire. But then also, again, having the courage to make that step, right? I think there's a huge lesson in the taking action, right? Because it is easy for an owner when you've got 1,000 other things going on. You're like, can someone just, I can't remember, this was a client of mine who is, learning through the process of some delegation and some things. There used to be the one that everyone comes to. Right. And then when there was a glimpse of like, hey, wait, I don't have to be the guy that everyone comes to. I'm going to go lean heavy into this because I've got scar tissue doing it myself. So like when I was like, you gave me an option, so I'm going to go over here. And then someone else can go take care of it. But if it's not all sewn up and expectations aren't set, when it comes back into the picture, they're like, so now I got to babysit everyone. We're trying to, most people just want to avoid that problem. Like maybe it'll just go away, but leaning in to just taking the action, right? I mean, because if you didn't do that, what would have happened?
I mean, I think we would have continued to toil because of the mismatch between the direction that our team wanted to go in. I think that mismatch, like either, at best you're staying level at best. Yeah. At best, you're not growing. And I think one of the messages you're telling other team members, whether they be employees or partners or maybe people outside or near the organization, is that you're going to tolerate that type of behavior. And I think that recognition, that an understanding that piece was really critical to us of like, what message are we telling everyone else that some of this behavior is actually acceptable? Geez, that's not a message we want to deliver. Yeah. It's not one we want to deliver.
Yeah. So I'm curious because I do, and I reference this fairly often. Once you made that move, what was the growth trajectory like?
So immediately we had a lot of focus because we were worried about the revenue that was very likely to be walking out the door, at least on the horizon. And so I think it energized us in a way where we were growing aggressively, but we went into like hyper growth. And we had to because we kind of had this refocus, it gave us an opportunity to rethink the way that we faced some of our clients, because we're very, 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 everyone is, right? Yeah. Very client focused, right? Yeah. And we became passionate. We became very, we were already pretty passionate, but we were wanting to have growth so that we weren't ever in this position again of relying in a way on certain pieces of revenue or certain individuals. And so I'd say it's cemented team-based selling, right? We were able to have more focus on making sure that when we face a client, there's a team that's facing that client. Yeah. I think the other component for us was who we hired and making sure that we had people who had high capacity. We already were pretty aware of that. We're a small team, but making sure that was true. And I think the other component was frankly more conversation around the cultural fit on the team and making sure that everyone was aligned with that, and which is wonderful.
So I'm gonna force the words into your mouth because the words that I use, it's funny, right? So multiplication by subtraction, right? So versus addition by subtraction, most people say, like that is one where it's the culture issue. There's all kinds of things that once that one thing is out of the way, right? How people rally together because it's the core value, focus, alignment, and everything else. And, so thank you. Like I was trying to make a point and you just made it for me, which is brilliant, which is how you just how you normally do it. I think there's one thing that I come back to also because how you generally simplify is excuse me, as brilliant as you are in many different ways and how articulate you can be. I think one of your superpowers to me is your simplification, how you can simplify things. And one of those is like growth strategy with clients. I remember you sitting me down and we were sitting down, it was in a golf cart, but we were talking through things about, hey, I had to struggle too with like how to grow, where do we add? And sometimes we just get into paralysis by analysis or being scared to go do something. And I distinctly remember, you saying, hey, you have simplifying again, but like, hey, you have this pod that works, right? This, whether it's a sales team, whatever you have, business development, inside, whatever it would be, you have this group and it works. And what is that worth? How much sales they do? Okay. Well, what if you just do that again? And what if you do that again? And it's just that simplifying piece of, wow, we don't have to overthink this, but you can just really, really simplify in the numbers to make decisions. I don't have a point other than just I don't know where I was going to actually turn that into a story, but you know.
Well, I think one of the things, like again, like your kind words around around how I think about stuff. One of the pieces that I think is been helpful for me as I've grown is like, I can't solve all these complex problems, right? I got to make the problem simpler. I have to make it simpler because if I don't make it simple, it's going to be, again, one, stuck in the analysis, or two, a lot too many variables. And so like, let's make the problem smaller and let's try and solve it in a shorter period of time, right? If my goal is to have 5x revenue in 3 years, okay, well, what's the goal this year? Maybe what's the goal this quarter? Let's break it down into a smaller problem, right? Like keep our eye on the trajectory, right? And understand how that fits in. But if we can make the problem a little smaller, then it's a little easier to solve, right? Because every day, if we're working towards that, as opposed to, once a year, you pick up a business plan and you look at it, you go, did we get to 5 times revenue in 3 years? And we looked at it twice before we got to the 3-year mark. That doesn't work. I mean, everyone, to some extent, everyone knows that, right? But rather, let's make this a simpler problem and let's put some objective numbers behind it, not necessarily how we feel about it, but let's try and make sure we're rooted in some numbers so that we can have an open conversation. And the other piece on that is ask the people. A tool that we've used a lot, right, is ask the people closest to the issue, because they probably know a bit more than someone who's removed 2 or 3 layers. One of the things that we were successful in growing, right, was to try and keep the organization as flat as possible. As absolutely flat. I mean, we wanted everyone to be near a client. We wanted every single person on the team to be near a set of clients or serving clients. And we serve clients in different ways, right? Maybe it's a pod-based approach, or we have a technical, silo that might provide support across all of the clients, right? And those are 2 different approaches. That's great. That's fine. But having everyone near a client so that we can make client-informed decisions and faster.
Yeah.
Because if we have to filter it through layers and layers and layers of management, all of a sudden we have decisions that are pretty far away from the client.
Yeah, and based off maybe their experience or whatever it might be versus actually what's happening.
Right.
Interesting. I'd love to move to, if you're willing, because we can certainly edit this if we're not. But obviously where you are today with Alliant was there was not an exit, because that's not actually what happened, right? There was an event,
right,
that got you to where you are with Alliant today, from where that conversation we were just talking about with your smaller team.
Yep. So we grew. Yes, let me bridge that. So we grew pretty dramatically in leading up to 2020, and we realized that to continue that growth, which was aggressive and fun, ton of fun. Everybody's having, it was a lot of fun to have that growth, right?
Yeah.
We recognized that we were going to need to make some significant investments in resources, some technical resources, and we realized that we were going to have to if we were going to stay the size we were, which is about a 15-person team, if we were going to stay that size, we weren't actually interested in staying that size. I should say, if we were going to see our growth, we were going to have to make some significant resources. And we found, and so we ran a process, and we found Alliant, and they were looking for us, and we were looking for them, and had a great match. Alliant, very entrepreneurial as an organization, tremendous growth, and really allowing our team and our team members to make the decisions that are best for the organization, which is something that I've truly cherished after transitioning over. So we had an event where we came over into Alliant in the Midwest, and we were able to continue that growth that we had experienced with a lot more financial backing from Alliant, and frankly, some of those great resources that we were looking for. Like, that's been a wonderful experience for us. Personally, good fit for me, for our team. And as we reflected on that, this is probably actually the reverse order. We thought, hey, how are we best going to serve our clients? That was the first question we asked. Okay, we recognize we need more resources. Alliant had those resources. That's great. How are our team members going to grow? We said to as we were talking with people about this decision, we said, hey, listen, you're part of a 15-person team. We're going to grow at the pace we're going to grow at, but if we could grow faster, that means you can professionally develop faster. And people got very excited about that opportunity. And then I think the third one for me and my partners was, personally excited about kind of the ability to continue that growth. And so those 3 things lined up for us. We looked at other competitors, but we felt Alliant was, really, and it has been a wonderful fit.
Because I think there's so many lessons in there for someone. There's not just one way to get growth. There isn't one way to exit a company. There isn't one way, right? many people, many business people are like, hey, you know what? I want to grow this company to sell it someday, right? There's an end somewhere, whether it's transitioning to our children or selling to PE, selling to or buying more, or just keep growing and stay. There's all kinds of different options. And, when I first was, on the outside of your journey and listening in, right? Many people, hey, when we have a transaction, it's again to sell. And so I didn't say exit because many people exit at some point. That's part of that strategy. And, it's been 5 years now?
Yep,
Plus?
5 years. Yep.
So that's not as common. Many entrepreneurs aren't great employees, number one. And so there's that part. So there's so many stories that I've heard of people trying to do an earn out or staying along, and they're just miserable. And they're like, man, this is awful. And whatever the reason, the company either fails or they just jump out as soon as they can. It's not very common to hear a story like yours that is, hey, you know what? We got a few bucks in the pocket, but we're a part of this journey and enthusiastically and investing in it, because that's what's been a great story. If we're plugging Alliant for you and for yourself, right? Is I know they've been plugging more of it was part of, hey, how do we grow this together and and investing. It's such an incredible story to me.
I think that's been the win, right? And I say it for our clients, for our people. It's been so wonderful seeing many of those people who are in that original team just grow, which has been fantastic. That's one of the great joys of us doing this. Yeah. I think the other piece was this real again, back to kind of that alignment, right? The alignment with the organization and us as individuals and us as a team was very, very, very tight. And I think that was exciting. And we felt very well supported. And at the same time, we've had great opportunities to serve more clients because of this. Yeah. And so that's been really wonderful.
All right. So the last part of plugging in for that. So, what territory, what do you guys actually do? We should allow people to know what actually you're doing. Sure. In that business.
Yep. So we help employers navigate their choices around employee benefits. What does that mean? That means that we help them make smart choices around their various medical plans, their pharmacy plans, dental, life, disability. So the benefits that they offer their employees, we help them make strong choices around that. Very often data informed, almost always is going to be data informed, right?
Yeah. They're big numbers, right?
They're big numbers.
Yeah.
And recently the challenges across healthcare is that cost curve is actually increasing. So rather than increasing by 3 to 5% per year, you're seeing medical inflation approaching and exceeding 10%. And so employers want to attract and retain strong employees. Well, to do that, you have to have a competitive benefits package. What does that include? Not only does it include salary and compensation and vacation time and it also includes benefits that they're providing to employees and their families. Mm-hmm. And so making sure that those dollars are best spent, making sure it meets the employer needs, and employer needs vary, right? We have employers who say, listen, I want to be at the leading edge. I want to be in the top decile for employee benefit programs. I want highest compensated employees. And we see other employers say, hey, listen, I want to be at the 51st percentile. I want to do better than average, but I'm going to focus my dollars elsewhere. I'm going to focus my dollars perhaps in salary and compensation, and I'm going to make employee benefits. And so those require smart choices. You don't just wake up and it just happens, right? So we have our clients are very thoughtful in that they're thinking about a multi-year strategy, and we're helping them formulate that. But they're thinking about a multi-year strategy. What's your human capital strategy? What's your employee benefit strategy? How does that align with your business strategy? And so that question, if you ask anyone in the C-suite, hey, what's your business strategy? They can pretty easily recite for you what they're focused on what they're focused on as a team. Sometimes you ask the question around what's your employee benefit strategy, what's your total rewards or human cap, right? In your people space, what are you doing? Yeah. And occasionally, that's a very powerful conversation where someone says, because we're changing our business needs, we got to relook at that. And we'd love some help, some outside help perhaps, in exploring that. And so that's where we step in and we're able to help people with it.
Yeah. And I got to imagine, because again, I've been a part of enough on the lower end of benefits conversations with with my base business and all that, right? Where we got a chart and here are the fees and all this kind of stuff, right? You're at a different level of a conversation than that, right? Year over year, this is the benefit cost, and but I know that you're obviously having a high level business conversation, which I think is second nature for you and all that, because you have so much other experience that with investing, or with helping other. Like, you've always been a help first for me. That's why, again, I owe you so much. We're in a Vistage group together and have been. That's how we know each other.
Yep.
And you're always help first with helping people look through, not just like tell them what to do, but like you're good at asking questions to get people to see maybe other ways to do it and points of view. I think it's part of your inquisitive nature, but also your experience in other forms of business, not just the one we're talking about.
Yep.
So is there I don't know where to tee this up in a different way. Is there a good nugget of help from your other entrepreneurial experience or your other things that you've seen or been a part of through your, because you do some really hands-on investment help, right? It's you do active investing, I guess, for lack of a better word, or have in the past.
Yep.
Is there a good nugget to share others from a learning perspective in your experience?
I think, one of the businesses that I was invested in early on, professional services business that focused on serving consumers, and we were, again, we were at a spot where we were that business was in hyper growth mode, was acquiring market share from competitors, and faced a lot of external pressure to serve a growing market. And so in that space, in that time, a lot of times that business was looking for like 80% solutions, right? Bubblegum and duct tape. Let's just figure out how we can get there, and we're building the bridges, we're walking across it, right? And that was that business's attitude. And I think that business worked well for a long time. And it ran into changing tides of the environment that it was competing in. The total addressable market shrank dramatically. It was cut in half, and that business was tooled for growth, not for sustaining. Mm-hmm. And so the one of the comments that lessons learned there was try to adapt a lot quicker. So that business was tooled to grow, and as that growth curve slowed and actually receded, it was slow to adapt to the changing environment. Which again, many businesses, they'll either overinvest in capital expenditures, or people. This business did not have much in the capital expenditures realm, but definitely had some in the people realm, right? And that recognizing that shrinkage was slow to recognize, was very painful.
Yeah.
And financially really constrained the business over time.
Yeah. You think that was not checking why do you think it was a slow movement?
I think two things happened. I think the leadership team was hopeful that it would change, the business environment would change, and that it wouldn't contract. Yeah. There was this thing called COVID, so it made it pretty. Yeah, this thing called COVID made it, and everyone was operating right with like a new environment. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I think again, back to like the data driven. What do we know from the data? Not how do we feel about it. What do we know from the data? Let's make sure we look and are checking ourselves on what the reality is close to the customer.
Yeah.
And being in tune with that. I think there was a delay in accepting what that new reality was.
Oh, well, yeah, there'll be plenty of studies about all that. Right? That's hard to, learn or, move fast enough, because if you're measuring the data in the right increments, right, at that point, maybe it was daily, but what's the activity, at least weekly, and then looking back to know when should we start making a move. But again, that was a totally different time.
Yep.
I'd love to shift to, because I love talking about all the roles that we play in life. And I've always been amazed at your presence, again, from the home standpoint, right? With you've been busy traveling, doing all these things, but really with your children, right? I've seen a presence from afar that I've admired with how busy you are and how you still find time for that. So, talk to me about your thoughts on your role in fatherhood.
Sure. So I had great examples of my parents, really, and I think it's, for me, it's not so much finding time, but it's prioritizing, right? It's like, did you choose to prioritize?
Yeah.
Where do you choose to prioritize your time?
Yeah.
And for me, a lot of that prioritization is with my kids. I very much enjoy being an active part of their lives. I love watching them grow. I share that, like, I talk with people about, people say like, oh, my kids were the favorite age when they were blank, right? Well, when they were 2 or when they were 5.
Yeah.
My favorite age for my kids is right now.
Yeah.
Like whatever right now is.
Yeah.
And I enjoy watching them grow. They're all different. They're into different things. And I'm hopeful that, I've given them some good opportunities to try some different stuff out and be who they are as people. And it's been fun. So I have a 10, 12, and 14-year-old, and they're great. They're a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I know, just based on stories, I feel like your son is a chip off the old block from what I call a nutbag standpoint, in a wonderful way, right? Just crazy energy kid. I want to come back to, you actually made a comment, and I thought about jumping in right when we first started about maybe some curiosity or something, because I think this is an interesting concept that you brought to the table for me as far as kids go, right? Because again, from academia, from your history and professional, entrepreneurial, whatever, it's always like, well, what do you want to push your kids to do, right? Or, what do we do? Because I think that's where this came up, was maybe when we were in an AI Vistage talk or something like that. Like, what's happening with jobs? What's the future of jobs for our children? Mm-hmm. And I recall, and I'm hoping you can recall it to just make this come and snap it perfect. What was your comment about your children, preparing them for the business world? Do you remember?
Sure. Yeah, I do. So I was at a lecture, a speech, a conversation with a very large staffing company. They had more than 500,000 W-2s they issue every year. Mm-hmm. And one of the leaders on that team was talking about some of the research they're doing. And so he had shared a stat that felt like this. If you look at the jobs that are available when he exited college, mm-hmm. the percent of the total jobs available, meaning the types of jobs, there was something like 80% of the jobs existed when he was born 20 years prior. Mm-hmm. Okay? So it's a 20-year look back. So he says, when I graduated college, about 80% of the jobs are available, right? Whatever those were. And he says now, and he was in his 50s, so this is 30 years later, he said, hey, we think it's probably like 20%. Oh. So Facebook advertising executive didn't exist. An advertising executive existed, but an online, how are we going to transact, right? A transaction platform that didn't exist. And so that someone's doing software engineering for that. Now, did engineers exist? Of course. Did software engineers? Of course. Yeah. But as they think about job types and how they're facing their clients, they said, listen, this point was driven home, which was like, we have to teach people how to learn, mm-hmm. because the pace of change is increasing, right? Everyone hears that. Everyone knows that. For them, in their business, it was very acute. They had to find people who could step into roles, adapt and learn as this business changed. I mean, now we see the proliferation of AI, and there's a bunch of new jobs that we didn't even think existed, right? Very recently. It's a good example. Yeah, right. Is AI, from a job perspective, a wide swath of the economy? No, it's not a wide swath of the economy. It's impacting a wide swath of the economy, but the actual job's different. Right. So, bringing it back to like, what am I teaching my kids, and what am I trying to teach my kids is I want to teach you how to learn, because the knowledge that you gain, the actual like rote memorization stuff. Right now, we have a cell phone that's more powerful than than lots of things. Right. So I have to teach you how to learn, and I think with again, bring back to the AI conversation as well. I think that for myself, for my children, for our team members, like, I want you to think about how to ask better questions, and be in a spot where you don't need to know the answer. You need to be thinking about, the right questions.
Yeah. Be curious.
Be curious.
Right. And again, whatever the sauce is, whatever your parents fed you, whatever it was, they created you, so came from one or two of them. That's how you've always come across, right? Is curious and getting that out. And I really think that that's just a nugget of, we so often come to, and guilty right here, of telling our kids what should be done, telling our kids what is the best path for them, telling our kids that they should be focused on their grades so that they can do better in college, right? I mean, again, I've had these conversations, so that's why it's easy for me to come up with. But flipping that to how do we ask them, and then it's the same thing with your employees, right? If you tell them to do it, they're about 70% likely to go do something similar to what you just said to go do, versus enrolling them in it, meaning asking them questions and getting them to that point. Then they're getting close to that 100% range. So that's a nugget. We'll make sure we get that nice and edited to, bomb out. So thank you. And at some point I do have to finish this podcast, because obviously I could sit with you all day. So what I'll do is, I do like to finish with a mistake. And you wrapped in a couple bumps in the road that you had earlier. And if it's that same one, fine. But what's a good mistake, failure, or something that you have experienced that could benefit the audience?
I think I reflect on some of that mismatch that we had culturally. And I think the mistake for me was assuming or believing that we were aligned when we weren't, despite signs to the contrary, and not having the courage to have a conversation around really understanding and being willing to be vulnerable to say, like, hey, maybe we're misaligned. And if I had a do-over, I think I'd ask that question a lot earlier of myself and of others. So it's more of an introspective question of alignment with one of our team members, and I think that trying to revisit that frequently to confirm that that we're marching in the same direction, moving in the same direction towards the same goal.
I think that's great, because most people get the feeling like they just know something's off, but like just ask that question, and then it does become external, because then you're going to presumably choose to take some action somewhere, right?
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Well, Dan, thanks. Again, I know we could go about 1,000 different directions on this. My heart is full seeing you. My heart is full having you finally on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap.
It was great.
Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to The Roll Call with John Glahn. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe for more insightful conversations. Remember, discovering your true role in life is a journey worth exploring each and every day. Until next time, keep defining your path and living your authentic self. This is John Glahn signing off.